So, hello, Kate and Grace. I understand it's birthday time. Um, Birthday just before now and a birthday after now. Someone thought it might be a nice birthday present to you guys um, to hear a story. And so I'm going to tell you a story that's original story. It's never been told to anybody. Nobody's ever heard it. It's made up out of my head just for you guys. So before I start, I want to tell you that I'm sitting in my office in a forest in the foothills of the Bighorn Mountains in northern Wyoming. And about 10 miles away up along the mountains is the ranch that I grew up on. In those days, it was called the Triangle T. And it was a pretty good sized ranch, and we had cattle and we also trained horses. And we trained horses for all kinds of things. Um, but if you know anything about horse shows, we trained horses for pleasure classes, for reining classes. That's a Western event. For jumping, and we also trained horses for a high performance rodeo event called cutting, cow cutting. Um, my first horse name was Buster. Now, Buster had a black tail and a black mane, and he was brown. And he was a little fat. He wasn't too tall, but he was too tall for me to get on him. And so my dad hung an extra stirrup off the left stirrup of my saddle. And that way I could climb up on Buster. Otherwise, I needed a tree stump or a big rock or a box or something because I was too small. So if I reached my hands up and got the leather straps right by the horn and the leather straps right by the back of the saddle, a cantle, and put my foot in the bottom stirrup, I could kind of do like a ladder and get up into the saddle. Well, I had to remember to put my right foot into the bottom stirrup, the lower stirrup, and my left foot into the regular stirrup, and then I'd swing aboard. Because if I put my left foot in the bottom stirrup and my right foot in the regular stirrup and swung up, I'd be facing backwards, facing Buster's rear end. Anyway, I had a lot of good times on Buster. Now, we had cattle and we had horses, and we trained, as I said, we trained horses for all kinds of things. And one of the things we trained them for was a high performance rodeo sport called cow cutting. And we, in fact, had some very, very good horses in cow cutting that competed in cow cutting. Now, I don't know if you know, but in rodeo events and some Western riding events, when you win, one of the prizes you get is a belt buckle. And today, the belt buckles are enormous. They're generally oval today, and they're enormous. In our day, they weren't quite so big, but it was a belt buckle that you would wear anyway. So, um, this story takes place in Connecticut. Now, in the western hills of Connecticut, there was a farm. And on that farm, there was a mother and a dad and a girl named Sarah. Sarah had long blonde hair, bluish gray eyes, and she was a little bit small, always a little bit small for her age. Not very small, just a little bit. She loved horses. And in August of the year that she was 12, her dad got an invitation for the three of them to go to a big horse show up in Massachusetts. And it was a horse show for Morgan horses. Now, in those days, Morgan horses were considered to be highly excitable and hard to make perform. They went into performances where they could be excited and prance, and that's how they were judged. Well, the show was interesting. There were jumpers and there were all kinds of classes. Almost entirely, the horses were almost entirely ridden by adults with high leather boots to their knees. I know, Kate, you've probably seen this when you've been riding, or maybe Grace, both of you, and they had, a tie on and a white shirt and a little jacket and stuff, but almost entirely by adults. And at the end of the evening, and this was in front of a grandstand with, a couple of thousand people and a big dirt arena out in front with where they set up the jumps and stuff. At the end of the evening, the announcer said, "Now, friends, I have a special friend I want to introduce to you who has a different perspective on Morgan horses." And up on the announcing platform walked a cowboy. He had a big hat. He had a cowboy shirt, blue jeans, boots, and he was introduced to the crowd. And the announcer said, "Now, I brought this man here. His name is Dean, and I brought this man here because he raises horses out in Montana, and he has been training some Morgan horses." And so the cowboy took the microphone. He said, "We've watched all the classes with these Morgan horses, and I just want to tell you, about a year ago, a man came to me out west and asked me if I could work with his Morgan horses in some Western kind of events." And we said yes. And the man said, "Well, I just want to warn you that these horses are pretty excitable." And the cowboy said, "Now I want you, we've had a lot of luck with these Morgan horses. I want you people to observe a couple of things here." And he said, "I've got my 12-year-old daughter on one of these horses, and I'd like to have her demonstrate a few things for you." And out into the arena in a Western saddle came his daughter, 12 years old. And she rode the horse out, walked the horse with a very, very loose rein. The reins were very, very loose. And she just moved the reins on the horse's neck to the left, and the horse just calmly walked to the left. She moved them to the right. The horse calmly walked to the right, and then she cantered, which is a slow lope, the horse very easily, quietly, that is, gently, up to the end of the arena and back. And she did a few turns here and there, just with a ever so light pressure on the reins. And this horse behaved like no Morgan horse that the audience had seen before. And then the cowboy said, "Now, I want to show you something else." He said, "Out west we have a rodeo event for girls and women called barrel racing. And I want to show you something interesting about this horse we've been working with." And his daughter got off the horse. While she was off the horse on the ground, several men rolled 3 big barrels, out into the arena and set them up in a triangular pattern, like a pyramid, a triangle, about an equal-sided triangle. And While they were doing that, the cowboy's daughter took the bridle off her horse, and then she got back on. And the cowboy announcing said, "Now the way this event works is, you start out and you go around one barrel, and you go in the base of the triangle, and then you ride as fast as you can to the other barrel, and then you go around it as tight as you can, and then you race up to the barrel in the top of the triangle, turn around it, and race back home, and everything's timed with a stopwatch." It's getting to be very, very popular out west. And so he said to his daughter, "Robin, why don't you show them what your horse can do?" And the girl leaned forward and nudged the horse with her heels, and at a very gentle canter, the horse went to the first barrel, around the first barrel very quietly, and in a gentle lope to the second barrel, around the second barrel, up to the end barrel, around the end barrel, and then came at a pretty fast pace, more than a lope, not a dead run, but almost, back and stopped past where a man was pretending to hold a stopwatch, which should be the finish line, and the horse dropped its head, stood there quietly, and Robin got off. And that was the end of the show for that evening. And the crowd gave a big round of applause. And as Sarah and Mom and Dad got up to leave, Sarah said, "I want to do that. I want to learn to do that. That barrel racing, that looks terrific." So all that winter, she studied everything she could about barrel racing. She got Dad to subscribe to the Western Horseman magazine, and there weren't many articles about barrel racing. Around February, she found one, and she read it probably 20 times, and she was so excited about it. Looked up everything she could on barrel racing. One spring day, on a Saturday, before school was out, Dad, after breakfast, said to Sarah, "Why don't you hop in the truck? We got an errand to do." And so she did, and they hopped in the truck, and they drove for about 35 minutes to a horse farm that she knew about. It had big white fences all around the pastures and lots of horses in the pastures. I mean, horses all over everywhere, because it was a horse farm. It's where they raised horses. And they drove into the yard, and there was a big white house. And as they drove into the yard, Sarah happened to notice to the side was a pickup truck with a horse trailer attached to it, and leaning against the pickup truck was a cowboy, big hat, Western shirt, blue jeans, boots. And so they drove up to the house, and a man came out, and Dad said, "Hello, Fred." And, "Hello, Tom. So this is Sarah?" "Yeah, Sarah, meet Fred. He owns the horse farm." And Sarah shook hands with Fred, and Fred said, "Come on over here. I want you to check something out." And they walked to a white fence bordering a smallish pasture. And there was only one horse in the pasture. It was a Palomino filly, yellow, with a white tail and a white mane. And she was kind of prancing around, cavorting around a little bit in the sun. It was a beautiful morning. And Fred said, "Sarah, what do you think of that horse?" And Sarah said, "Oh, she's fantastic. She's beautiful." And at the sound of her voice, the filly stopped and came walking close to the fence, not right up to the fence, but close to the fence. And Fred said, "Sarah, why don't you give her something?" He reached in his pocket and pulled out a carrot. He handed Sarah the carrot. Sarah walked up to the fence and held the carrot through the fence. And the filly walked up and munched on the carrot and then stood there and allowed Sarah to rub her nose and talk to her and tell her what a pretty horse she was. And Dad said, "Well, what do you think? What do you think about that filly, Sarah?" And Sarah said, "I think she's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Dad said, "That's good, because she's yours." And Sarah's eyes got really wide and she looked at Dad. Her mouth fell open and she said, "What do you mean?" And Dad said, "Why don't you explain it, Fred?" And Sarah turned to Fred, and Fred said, "On this farm, we raise horses principally for jumping. That's what we raise horses and train horses for." Now, this filly's mom had a little quarter horse in her, and for some reason, we cannot interest her in jumps. We've tried. We've even had somebody on her walk her up to a jump, and she shies away. She doesn't want anything to do with jumping. And Fred said, "Now, the key thing about a horse that jumps is they have to love to jump. And this horse wants nothing to do with it." Now, you look at her back end and you can see she's muscled. She's a little bit more muscled than some of the other horses around here. You can see the muscles on either side of her tail. That's the markings of a quarter horse. And if she doesn't want to jump, there's nothing we can do with her. And so I talked to your dad, and he said, "You were real interested in horses, and we made a deal. And your dad got this horse for you." And Sarah she just couldn't believe it. And Dad turned around and called across the yard, "Hey, Raymond, come on over." And the cowboy walked away from the pickup and walked across the yard. And Dad introduced Sarah to him. He said, "Sarah, this is Raymond Wood. And he has a house and a riding arena and a barn within a mile and a half from our place. We've gone past it. It's a red barn. We've gone past it a couple of times, but never paid any attention too much." And Sarah said, "Yeah, I remember that house. And there's a big arena, big riding ring out back." And Dad said, "Raymond has agreed to let us put the filly in his barn, and he's agreed to help you learn how to ride and learn how to do a little barrel racing." And Sarah's eyes got really big around, and she shook her head. And Raymond said, "Well, let's go get the horse." So they went down to a gate, walked in with a halter, and the filly had been trained to a halter. And Raymond put the halter on. Then he gave the halter rope to Sarah. He said, "Why don't you lead her to the trailer?" Sarah led her over to the trailer, and the filly followed right beside her and bumped her with her nose a couple of times. Just wanted to be close to her. And Raymond showed Sarah how to lead the filly up into the trailer. And they tied her halter to the side of the trailer, loosely, very, very loosely, and got out. And Dad said, "We'll follow you. We'll follow you to your place." So they did. And Sarah's going, "Who is Mr. Wood? Who is he? How did you know him?" And her dad said, "He's a horse trainer. He's retired. He's from Texas. He trained horses all his life, high performance horses. trained, and he moved to Connecticut because he has a bad heart. And his son lives in Hartford and didn't want him to be so far away in case he had heart problems. So he bought the little place that you've seen and with a red barn and had an arena, riding ring, built out back, and he trains horses and helps people learn how to ride and stuff. And he said he'd love to help you learn to ride and to train on the barrels. So they got to Raymond's little farm, little farm. It was a small farm, and led the horse out, put her in a stall in the barn. There were only 3 or 4 stalls in the barn. Put her in a stall. Raymond showed Sarah how to get some hay for her and how to get some water in a water bucket for her and how to rub her down. And Sarah stayed there and Dad with them a good deal of the afternoon. And at one point, Raymond asked him if they'd like to come in the house and have a lemonade. Was there. And her name was Shirley, and she had gray hair. She was an older woman, and she was tall and slender. And in the kitchen, they were having a lemonade, and of course, there was a cookie or two there for Sarah. And Sarah noticed pictures on the kitchen walls, black and white pictures, photographs. And she went up and she started looking at them. And one of the pictures was of a younger version of Raymond, that is, Raymond as a young man on a horse, with the horse turning at an impossible angle. Its right shoulder was so low to the ground, it looked like the horse would tip over. And there was a cow turning in the same direction in front of the horse. And at the bottom of the picture, it said Raymond Wood on brown jug in the National Cutting Horse Finals. And Sarah couldn't believe it. And she kept looking at pictures. There were some more of them. And there was a picture of a woman, a young woman, on a horse at full speed going around a barrel. And at the bottom of the picture, it said Shirley Wood competing in Cheyenne Frontier Days. Now, in her reading, Sarah knew that Cheyenne Frontier Days was one of the biggest rodeos in the West. Not the biggest, but one of the very biggest. And she turned and looked at Shirley and said, "You were a barrel horse rider?" And Shirley said, Yep, we had some good horses and had some good fun in those days. And Sarah couldn't believe it. So the next morning, they came over. Dad and Sarah came over to the woods, and Raymond started working with Sarah with a filly. And as they walked out to the barn, Raymond said, "Have you got a name for this horse?" Sarah said, "Yep, Cricket." Cricket? How did you come up with that name? Sarah said, "I couldn't sleep all night. I couldn't sleep all night, and the crickets were going crazy outside my window, and it came to me, that's her name, Cricket." And so it was. And Cricket seemed to really respond to Sarah. She seemed really to respond to her. And Raymond taught Sarah how to brush her down and feed her and walk her around with a halter. And then she was over there every day. Sarah went back every day. It was close enough that on the days when Dad was tied up, she could ride her bike. She showed up every day. And Raymond had a very gentle way with horses. He spoke to Cricket in a low voice, was very, very gentle, taught Sarah how to be very, very gentle. First thing they did was they walked her out in the riding arena and put a saddle blanket on her and let her have just walk around with a saddle blanket. And she had actually been ridden, but a Western saddle is different from an English riding saddle, much heavier and bigger. So let her walk around with a saddle blanket, and then he brought out an old Western saddle, which he had shortened the stirrups to Sarah's size. They put the saddle on her and cinched up the saddle, and he boosted Sarah up. And the horse wasn't big. The horse was about 14 hands. And if you don't know that size, it's not a big horse. It's not a small horse. It's about a medium-sized horse, 14 hands. And he started Sarah riding. And they worked all that summer of her 13th year on getting the two familiar with each other, Sarah and Cricket. And gradually, he had Sarah start to lope Cricket around the arena, and they progressed and they started working on agility kind of things. And by the time it was August, Sarah was able to run Cricket down the length of the arena and stop her very, very short, back on her back legs, stop real fast, and then become absolutely quiet. Turn around, and at a signal, run her down to the other end of the arena, stop her real fast. And they added to that run, stop, and then swing her, pivot on her back legs to the right without her front legs touching the ground. Pivot to the right, and then pivot 180 degrees to the left with hardly her front legs touching the ground. And Sarah, it took a while for Sarah to ride well enough to be able to do this, but Cricket was extremely agile. They taught her to walk facing the fence on the inside of the arena, walk sideways, feet crossing one over the other, one way and the other way. They taught her to walk, trot, and canter, out of verbal command. And as the summer went on, Raymond said to Shirley, this horse is really fast, and this horse is smart, and this horse really likes Sarah. It's obvious. So at the end of the summer, and they started working on barrels. About halfway through the summer, they started working on barrels. And in the beginning, Sarah would walk Cricket around the right-hand barrel, walk over the left-hand barrel, walk her up to the end barrel and back to the starting point. And then, progress, trot around one barrel, around the other, so that Cricket got the idea of what they were doing, and then lope, and then try to go a little faster than a lope. And Sarah had to, it turned out Cricket was so agile, she could turn so fast that Sarah had to grab the horn, and Raymond said, that's okay. Most barrel riders do hold onto the horn because these horses can turn really fast. At the end of the summer, it's the 13th year, they entered a couple of competitions, and he found some barrel racing competitions, one up in Massachusetts, one over in New York, and they were just little events, little horse show events, add-ons, but barrel racing was starting to get popular in the East. And both times, Sarah was so excited, and Cricket was so excited, they knocked over the second barrel once and the last barrel, the second event. And knocking over the barrel is a 10-second penalty on your time. And their times at this point were about 30 seconds to do the triangle and get back to the starting point. And Raymond taught Sarah that fall. He said, you can't bend. This horse is so responsive to you. You can't lean over too quickly when you get to the barrel because she'll turn so tightly she'll knock over the barrel. And that's what happened with you in these two competitions. And they practiced all fall. Every day, almost every day after school, Sarah was over there practicing. Winter came. And Raymond said, we can't do a whole lot of practicing when it's dirt and not snow. When it's snow, you can ride her, but unless we have bare dirt, we don't do any training. But Sarah was over there anyway every day, and she would have a ski parka on, a ski hat, and snow pants. And whenever the weather was good enough to be outdoors, she was riding cricket. So went through the winter, and she turned 14 in April. And as soon as the weather was good, they started practicing again. And this summer, almost every Saturday, not quite, but almost every Saturday, Raymond found a competition somewhere. Sometimes they had to drive a long way. Sometimes Dad couldn't go. Raymond and Shirley would go. And they found a competition for her. And she knocked over more barrels, but gradually she knocked over less barrels every time. And her times, in the beginning, when she was 13, her time was running around 30 seconds to do the triangle. But somewhere when she was 14, she was dropping her times because they were getting better at it. She was dropping her times to 27, 28 seconds. And she was about in the middle of the group of girls competing. These were all 14 and 15-year-old girls in that age group. And she was dropping her time some, but she'd finish about the middle of the pack. If she knocked over a bow, she had a 10-second penalty. So instead of 26 seconds, it'd be 36 seconds, and she'd be out of the competition. But they got gradually better and better. And by the end of the summer, she was getting her times down into the 26-second range, and she was finishing third or fourth in the competitions. She actually won a competition at the very end of the summer and got her first belt buckle. And Mom and Dad and Raymond and Shirley, they were all so proud of her. They all went out for a great dinner on the next weekend when there was no competition. Dad took them all out for a great dinner, and they celebrated Sarah's first belt buckle. That winter, the winter when she was 14, Raymond arranged for them to go to an indoor riding arena once a week. And on the dry dirt, and he dragged his barrels in the pickup over to the indoor riding arena, set up the barrels, and she and Cricket practiced. And they got faster. And in April, when she turned 15, Shirley gave her a beautiful cowboy hat. And it fit really tight. And Shirley said it's supposed to, because when you're getting faster and faster, you want that hat to stay on your head. And so the summer when she was 15, they started competing almost immediately. And she started doing better and better in the 14, 15-year-old group. She was now in the older age group. And she ran into a girl from Albany, whose name was Amanda, who was 15 and had a big black horse named Buck. And Buck and Amanda had been training a little bit longer, and they were just a touch faster. But Sarah and Amanda became really good friends. And Amanda was always beating her. They might finish fourth and fifth. They might finish third and fourth, sixth and seventh. They were usually very, very close to each other. And halfway through the summer, at the end of July, beginning of August, Shirley said to Raymond, I think you may need to make a change in your strategy. I've been watching cricket, and Sarah's always going to the right-hand barrel first, which makes her turn right, then left on the other barrel, and then left at the end barrel. It's 2 left turns, 1 right. I think you should change it. I think you should start her on the left barrel, which is left turn, go to the other barrel, which is a right turn, and then the barrel, the tip of the pyramid, tip of the triangle, a right turn. I think cricket turns faster to the right. And so they began making that change. And it took a couple of weeks for Cricket and Sarah to get in the mode of going to the left barrel first. And when they did, as they got it down, the times started to drop. The times started to come from 26, 27 down to 23, 24. Even down to 21 seconds. And at this level, the timing was with a stopwatch. And the girls started at a standing and started the horses running to the first barrel from a standing position. So the time started coming down, and she started winning more than Amanda. And Amanda and she became very, very good friends. But the change in the strategy of how they ran the horses was dramatic. And at the end of the summer, Raymond entered Sarah in the New England Barrel Championships in Boston. And Amanda's father entered her in the New England Barrel Championships in Boston. Now, in Boston, it was a big indoor arena. It was a big, huge horse show, of which barrel racing was the last event every night. And it was 4 days, and there were, oh, gee whiz, there were probably 60 to 80 girls from all over New England entered in the barrel racing, and they competed to eliminate, it's called go rounds. They had go rounds, which is sessions of racing in which they eliminated the slower girls and wound up for the finals with the 12 fastest girls. Now, things changed at this level of competition. The entrance to the side entrance to the arena was an alleyway with metal fencing on either side of the alleyway. And then it opened out into the arena. Now, at this level of competition, the girls started running their horses in the alleyway. So they came out into the arena at a full dead run. And they crossed, now, there were no more stopwatches. They crossed, 2 cameras were set up with an electronic beam running between the cameras. And the girl at a dead run would break the beam and start the time, and she'd do the circuit, the barrel circuit, and race back and break the beam, and that gave them a time, because now the times were not only 22 seconds, but they were 22.1 and maybe even 22.12. They went into the hundredths of a second, the tenths of a second, hundreds, because the horses, at this level, the horses start to get real close in ability. So they progressed through the 4 days of the New Englands, and Amanda qualified number 11 for the finals, the 11th rider, and Sarah qualified number 12. And there were 12 finalists. And on the night of the finals, they were really excited. And there was a big crowd, several thousand people in the grandstands. This was an indoor arena, several thousand people in the grandstands. And they each wished each other luck, and they had to wait for all the other girls to go. And the the as they got to their turn, to be their turn, the fastest time was 20.20 seconds, 20.1 seconds. Pretty fast. They had both touched that kind of time before, but pretty fast. These were the best 14, 15-year-old girls in New England. So Amanda goes with Buck. And she flew, and Sarah was cheering her all the way. And she came back at 19.98. She was in first place. And Sarah gets a boost up on cricket from Raymond, and Raymond says, just have fun. You know Cricket loves to run. She loves to run. She's excited. She can feel your excitement. She'll feel the excitement of the crowd. Just have fun. And so Sarah put her in a run down the alley, crossed the electronic line. She broke, the electronic line, made her left turn, and Cricket just spun on the left barrel, raced for the right barrel, spun on the right barrel, and headed for the far end barrel. Spun really, really tight. And her legs went out from under her, and Cricket fell. And there was a huge groan from the crowd. And Cricket scrambled to her feet, and Sarah was lying on the ground. Well, Raymond and Dad and the ambulance crew charged out into the arena, and long story short was that Sarah had broken her leg. The horse had fallen on her and broken her leg. And so Raymond, they got Sarah to a hospital and got her leg set in a big cast. And as they were driving home the next day, because they had to spend the night in Boston, but for her to be in the hospital and stuff, as they're driving home the next day, Dad said, Raymond had a stopwatch on you, and he thought you were going to beat Amanda because Amanda won the competition. He thought you were going to beat her. Well, no riding all fall. And then a rehab on the leg because it was a pretty bad break. And she started riding again in January. And in the beginning, it was, fairly gentle riding. And then her leg was cleared. The doctors cleared her leg. And then they started into serious riding competition 3 days a week in the indoor arena. And she practiced all, January, February, March, April, turned 16 in April, and she was ready. And in May, Raymond started getting her into competitions almost every Saturday. And the buckles started to increase. And all that summer, when she was 16, she and Amanda, not quite every weekend, but most weekends, one or the other of them would win the barrel racing. And their times dropped to under 20 seconds regularly. 19.8, 19.7, 19.9, sometimes over 20, and they wouldn't, even at 20 with the 15 and 16-year-olds, they were still close to winning every time. And she got a lot of buckles, and Amanda got a lot of buckles, and they cheered each other on. at the end of August, Raymond said, um, I hope you can get, I've talked to your dad, and he's talked to your school, and in late September, I think the school has agreed to let you have 4 days off because I've entered you in the Eastern Barrel Racing Championships down in Baltimore. And this is an unlimited class. That is, there's no age restriction. You will be racing against 18-year-olds. 18-year-old was the highest age classification. You'll be racing against 18-year-olds to 30-year-olds. Some of these women are professional riders. You will be racing, but your times, you've been in the 19s, high 19s. I think you can get down into the lower 19s, and that's a competitive level for these women. And so, in the middle of October, she got a week off from school, and she and Dad and Mom and Raymond and Shirley went to Baltimore. And it was a big rodeo. It was not a horse show. It was a big rodeo in an indoor arena. And there must have been 3,000 or 4,000 people in the grandstands inside this arena, a big arena. And she saw rodeo stuff she'd only ever heard about. Broncs, bull riders, calf roping. She saw all the stuff. And at the end of the night was the barrel racing competition. And in the first, and there were a series of eliminations. And the first time that she went out for the first elimination round, she was really nervous, and Cricket picked it up, and Raymond stopped her in the alley. She was making Cricket really nervous. Cricket was prancing around, not under control, and Raymond made her get off, made her talk quietly to Cricket, and he talked quietly to Sarah, and he said, now I know you've never done anything like this. Some of these women back here are way older than you, but they all ran barrels just like you've been running them, and I think your horse is equal to any of them. Now you go out there and have fun. Forget this is a big East Coast competition. You go out there and have fun. And Sarah calmed down, and when she calmed down, Cricket calmed down. Now, what I mean by calm down is got under control, because sometimes a barrel horse can get so excited because of the rider that they go out and they go too wide on the barrels. They stumble. They get too excited. So Sarah calmed down, and when she calmed down, Cricket calmed down. Came time for them to go, and they flew down the alley, out into the arena, and they had a 19.6 time. One of the faster times they'd had all summer. Not the fastest, they'd been below that, but one of the fastest times. And they qualified. And they had 2 qualifying rounds to get to the finals. And on the second round, she was much more relaxed. She'd never raced. I mean, she'd raced before a pretty big crowd, but nothing as big as this. With all the cowboys watching, the rodeo cowboys watching, standing alongside the chutes and alongside the inside of the fences watching. I mean, it was not only the public, but it was all the cowboys. And she, with her blonde hair and her gray hat, and she was smallish. And her beautiful horse, her beautiful Palomino horse, they all loved her. The cowboys loved this young girl because a lot of the women were, in their 20s, even in their 30s, and had been racing for years. The cowboys loved, and Amanda too, loved these 2 girls, 16 years old, competing in the open barrel racing. So they qualified, and she qualified again, and Amanda qualified, and came to the last night of the rodeo and the finals. And there were 15 horses in the finals, and they weren't the slowest, but they were nowhere near the fastest. They had qualified around 13 and 12. Um, Amanda had been a little bit faster. She was number 12, and Sarah was number 13. And some of the women, were down. The women in first and second. The time they were running around 19.2, 19.25, 19.26, right around in there were the winning times, or the times that the top girls were setting. So by the time it came for them to run, 19.14 was the fastest time. 19 seconds, 19.14. And came time for Amanda. And Amanda fired out of the alley and around the barrels, up to the last barrel and back, and Buck just stretched and ran. 19, what was it? What did I say? 19.14, and the Buck was 19.18. Just a little bit slower. And came time for Sarah and Cricket. And Raymond was right there, and Dad was there, and Raymond said, "Don't forget, you're just beginning this whole thing. You haven't done it very much. You're going to be doing it for a long, long time. The main thing is to have fun." And the other point that I forgot to tell, when she was 16, Raymond had given her a set of spurs to wear on her boots, and she didn't want to do it. But he said, "Cricket wants to run for you more than anything. She wants to please you. You've never used spurs before, but when you don't have to spur her until the last barrel. And when you go around the last barrel, just lightly touch her with the spurs, and she'll know that she's supposed to go." And that was part of the reason why they were so successful in this summer, this 16th year summer. So she had her spurs on, of course. And so time came, and they flew down the alley, flew out into the arena, and the Cowboys, there was a cheer from the Cowboys because Amanda and Sarah were the youngest girls in the whole competition. There was a cheer from the Cowboys, and Cricket's tail was streaming out behind, and by now Sarah had a pretty big pigtail streaming out behind her, and they went around the left barrel, over to the right barrel, and Cricket's hind end on the right barrel, she spun on her hind end and shot toward the tip of the triangle, shot like an arrow. And as they approached the barrel, Sarah had to tell herself, "Don't lean too soon, don't lean too soon, we don't want to tip over the barrel." And she held herself upright, a little bit more upright than she wanted to, because the crowd was roaring. And she leaned at the last instant, and her foot hit the barrel. Her right foot hit the barrel. And she put the spurs harder than she intended to Cricket. And Cricket was startled with the spurs and shot towards the finish line. And the barrel tipped up on its edge, and the crowd groaned, and it teetered there, and poof, settled back down the way it was supposed to. And the crowd was screaming and yelling, and Cricket flew through the electronic beam and down the alley back into the back area where the horses assembled. Thunderous applause from the crowd. The announcer waited and waited until everybody was quiet. And then he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, Cricket's time was 18.86, the fastest time in the competition. Cricket and her 16-year-old rider have won. And we want them to come out here and get their award." And so Sarah rode Cricket back out and into the arena, and the crowd went bananas. And the announcer waited until it was all quiet, and then he handed one of these enormous belt buckles to Sarah. And he said, "There's another prize for you at the judging stand later." But he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know that this 16-year-old girl and her horse Cricket, with this time that they put up today, have qualified for the National Barrel Racing Championships to be held in Fort Worth, Texas in December." And the crowd went crazy. And that is the end of the story. Well, gals, I hope you liked it. I hope it wasn't too long for you. And happy birthday again.